Hello, hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. We are here with part 2 of our interview with the amazing Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. We're going to cover more around nutrient depletions in women, why that's important, why we need to care. Especially, we actually had a good conversation around post-birth. So if you are someone who's in a secondary infertility journey, and maybe you had a really easy time getting pregnant the first time and now it's not happening as quickly. This is a conversation we have inside FCM quite a bit with our women who come in with secondary infertility and they're like, Kelsey, I don't get it. We got pregnant fairly easily, fairly early on, no issues. And now it's been 6 months, it's been 8 months, it's been a year, it hasn't happened. And I'm often the one telling them like, you know what, the body in general, it's been 2 years, 3 years, like you're different regardless, but you're also significantly different in the instance of hormones, post-birth, post-breastfeeding, if you chose that route. You're different in the sense of various nutrient depletions. And so Lisa and I had a good conversation around how depleting pregnancy can be. And I think from a secondary infertility angle, it's really important to know these things and how to support our body might be a little bit different the second time around than the first time around. And then Lisa shares with us some more information about the fertility awareness method, how to use it on your fertility journey. If you're early on, or if you are listening to this episode because you're thinking about coming off of birth control to get pregnant and you've been inspired to do that sooner rather than later, amazing. Now what? Like if you don't want to get pregnant right this second, how do we make sure that doesn't happen in a way that suits both of you? And FAM is such a beautiful way to not just learn about your body for fertility, but learn about your body for the years to come as well. Like I mentioned in part 1, if you haven't caught that episode yet, go back 1 episode to 119. That's part 1 of this conversation. And I shared in there that I'm still tracking my cycle. I'm still using my FAM rules, even though we're not actively trying to get pregnant, because it really does help show me about my health overall and get to see patterns and trends. And when I want to do blood work, when I want to maybe look at my hormones, when I want to dig deeper into certain symptoms, I almost always see some sort of reflection of how I'm feeling in my chart. And it can be really helpful to guide you through that next stage of your journey as a woman outside of the fertility realm as well. So I hope you enjoy. As always, come find me at Fertility Confidence Method on Instagram. You can find Lisa over at Fertility Friday. She also hosts her top-rated podcast, Fertility Friday Radio. Highly recommend checking that out as well. I'll pop all her links in the show notes again for you guys, and I will see you on the other side. Take care.
It's so interesting because you probably heard, I think we've all heard these sentiments. Like if you ask your doctor about nutrition, they'll say, don't worry, the baby gets everything that
baby
they need.
needs. Yeah.
But like, what about you?
Yeah. And I tell my clients that too. The baby takes what the baby needs. Yeah. We're not just here to support the baby, but like we have to also make sure that you're not coming out on the other side of this, a shell of yourself, which is what will happen essentially.
Well, and I'd love to call out, I feel that there's some serious holes in our healthcare system because no one cares about the mom postpartum. Like other than the 6-month check and get on birth control, right? Other than that, I mean, where's the nutrient panel?
Right.
I mean, there's a slew of nutrients that are very commonly depleted in women who've just given birth, and no one's checking for those. And that includes everything we just, all the B vitamins, like B12 in particular, folate, like B6, like all of those nutrients. Iodine, no one's checking for that. I mean, our requirement for virtually every nutrient, vitamin A, it's huge. There was this really interesting paper, I feel like it might have been Lily that shared it with me years ago, and it talked about all this stuff that vitamin A does. It was talking about the postpartum phase. And, for anyone who's been pregnant, lactated, it's like you get new breasts. So like before you were pregnant, your breasts were different. And then when you were pregnant, your breasts literally change. It's like you get new breasts because now they can lactate. Yeah. And then when you're done breastfeeding, they change again because now they don't lactate anymore. And, sometimes the changes are less favorable, People talk about that. But in this paper, it was talking about the role of vitamin A and how it kind of reconstructs breast tissue and all this stuff, like the vital role. Like hopefully the overarching point is that this is the time for us as women when we need the most care and often get the least. And so this whole, it's more than just, to go back to why I started on this tangent, it's more than just we want to get pregnant. Of course we want you to get pregnant. Of course we do. But we also want you to have a full, rich life. We want you to have energy to take care of your little ones. We want you to be able to show up in the best possible way. It's hard to do that some days, even when you're nutrient replete. So how hard would it be if you're totally deficient in iron and like you have barely any nutrients on board to support all your bodily processes?
Right. Really quick, Lisa, for those that are listening who are perhaps not into their fertility journey yet, and so they are on hormonal birth control and they're being proactive and learning and figuring out, for those that are feeling maybe a bit nervous about the concept of like coming off too early and things happening quicker than they want, can you just speak really briefly on like the efficacy of fertility awareness method to actually prevent pregnancy if that's what the goal is?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge piece of it. One thing I say, I feel it's controversial to say, but maybe less controversial as the time goes by. I do feel like someone should say it. Like as we get older, so it's one thing when we're in our early 20s, mid 20s, but like I feel like as we get into our later 20s and early 30s, I think that it is prudent to start considering the type of birth control that we're using. I find that we make these decisions when we're very young about how we're going to handle our fertility. And then we don't always revisit those decisions just to check in with ourselves to see if this is still the best thing for me.
Right.
So that's the first thing I'll say, which is that let's just kind of pause the fear part of it for a moment. And I would encourage everybody, you know, if you're still taking contraceptions, fine. It might still be the best thing for you.
Yeah.
But when was the last time you actually checked in with yourself and thought, you know, is this still the right thing?
Yeah.
Because as we talked about, your body does go through this transition phase, whether you're ready for it or not. The one thing about fertility awareness is that, so one of my observations has been that women can go, so I'll try to make this make sense. In my programs, I talk about the intention scale. And some of you, like, I'm not sure if you've heard of this concept, but basically it's like from 0 to 10, you know, how much do you want a baby today, right? And so obviously your conception clients are typically at a 10. And then everyone who's like absolutely not ready right now is at a 0. But a lot of us are in between. The reason I bring this up is because in our minds, it's possible to go from like a 0 or 1 or a 2 or whatever to a 10 in like one day.
Yeah.
And the example would be like the classic example, like you get married. So before you didn't want to get pregnant and now you're married and now boom. So this is the challenge where you could be in this mindset right now, but things could change. There could be some specific thing that you're waiting for. You could be waiting for a promotion. You could be waiting for a move. And so the hard thing is that your emotions can change very, very quickly, but your body doesn't.
Right.
So from a practical standpoint, that's like my preface to answering your question, which is like, we do want to think about this also from a practical standpoint, because I want to live in a world where you, from my definition of feminism, would be that you have the choice to avoid pregnancy when you want, but also you have the choice to conceive easily, hopefully, when you're ready. So in terms of the efficacy, I mean, fertility awareness, I think everybody doesn't need to use it as a method, but the concepts and understanding your cycle is something I think that everyone would benefit from. So the basic, what it's based on is the science of how our bodies work. So you're not fertile every single day. There's a window of fertility. So from a scientific standpoint, there are about 6 days of the cycle where you can get pregnant. And then if you're using it as a birth control method, we do have to add on a bit of a buffer period there. So in a standard average menstrual cycle, like 29 days, there's something like 9 days where we would have to avoid unprotected sex at a minimum in order to make it work. And what's interesting about it is that there's research, there's science. So we can look at what the science has to say. When we use standardized method of charting, there was a study that had these women use the symptothermal method, and they were, trained to identify when their fertile window opened and when it closed. That's the study I think that cited the most, and the efficacy was 99.4%. So that was perfect use. These were women who used the method correctly. They had a defined, instruction for when to open the fertile window, when to close it based on different biomarkers. And I think that that's really helpful because I mean, I've had clients who are legit, like they're in my program already, like they're fully bought in and they're like, so when you say unprotected sex, do you mean like not even withdrawal? Because we're so programmed, right? That we can't even believe it. But
Yeah.
we can, the reason why it works is because there's a period of time in our cycle where our cervix, so the opening into the uterus, is actually open. And that corresponds to the time when we can observe our cervical fluid, which looks like the creamy white hand lotion or clear, stretchy, raw egg whites. And this is happening as we approach ovulation under the influence of estrogen. As we go into our cycle, we have our period. And as our period comes to an end, what's happening in our ovaries is that an egg is developing. And as that follicle develops, it's releasing estrogen. And that estrogen is what is stimulating the cervix to make cervical mucus. It is softening the cervix, opening it. So there's actually this window of time where we're open. So again, me with my lovely analogies, I always picture like a nightclub. So it's like the bouncer is out to lunch doing his thing and like it's just open. And it's like, hey guys, like we're step right up. But then outside of that window, like after ovulation, what happens is once you ovulate, the what's left, the follicle becomes the corpus luteum. So if you were to look inside the body, you would see the kind of like this yellow scar looking thing on the ovary, and that starts pumping out progesterone. So quite literally, we don't pump out this progesterone until ovulation. It's the result of a physical event that happens. So it is science. And this is the great part about it, because a lot of people might still have the misconception that this is like your grandma's rhythm method and it's based on calendar calculations, right. But it's actually based on observing these biomarkers that we can see in real time. So, excuse me, after ovulation, when that progesterone starts rising, that progesterone shuts down our mucus production. So we typically shift into dry days and the cervix becomes closed. So bouncer's back and no one's getting in. And so if you go into the weeds, into the research on the actual cervical fluid, our cervix fills with this plug and it's got this very thick, dense quality about it that is so dense that it's kind of like a net that doesn't even allow sperm to pass through. So it's so thick that the sperm can't even traverse. So there are times in the menstrual cycle where it's legitimately impossible to get pregnant because after ovulation, if the egg is not fertilized, it disintegrates and is reabsorbed within a day. So after that 12 to 24 hour period, there's no egg. And if there's no egg, there's no pregnancy. So we've got no egg. We've got a closed cervix. We've got like a trap that won't.
Bouncer's back. Yeah, he's laid some traps.
Yes. And you could even say he laid down like I'm picturing something in my mind, but like I can't describe it, so I don't know if it's about but there's like nails sticking up on the floor, and if you try, because
one of those things in the cartoons they roll out on the highway, like when they don't want the cars to keep going. Yeah,
exactly that. And the reason I say that is because the vagina is extremely acidic outside of that fertile window, and that the environment, sperm need to be in a nice like basic, like not basic like basic, but basic like the science alkaline basic. But they need that type of environment. So the acidity with the trap and like the nails, right? They can't do anything. So they die within a few minutes or hours. And this is not something that I was taught in junior high. Like I was not taught that my vagina was basically a death trap for these guys outside of this, short window of time. So although men are fertile, they're making sperm from puberty onwards every day, all the time. So they're the ones that are fertile all the time. We actually just have this window. So what the good thing about fertility awareness, on the most basic level, you start to learn about your body and learn how it works. So it's no longer a mystery. Yeah. And that can give you a lot of confidence, especially if you're wanting to then shift to a non-hormonal birth control method. Because when you learn this, now I always say like everybody is not going to be dying to use fertility awareness. There's some women who are going to say, I don't know if this is for me. And that's fine. So people self-select. But for those of you who are listening, who are really excited about this and like are really feel drawn to this, know that it is possible. It just takes a little bit of time to learn the method. I recommend that if you are learning on your own, that you definitely have a backup. So something like condoms for a while. You want to take a minimum of about 3 full cycles before you start using it on your own. I do feel that for women who are really wanting to use this as birth control, who are concerned, like
Yeah.
what you said in your initial question, I do recommend finding an instructor because it really helps to speed up the learning process and to
Yeah.
increase your confidence so that because you don't, like, when you make mistakes, like, right, because you do stuff wrong, like they could
Yeah.
result in an unplanned pregnancy. So if you work with an instructor, you're much less likely to make those same kinds of mistakes. And you're much more likely to kind of rapidly gain that confidence so that you can be using the method in a shorter time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an option, and it can be used alongside your other non-hormonal methods like condoms, and I guess the most controversial thing that my clients, well, many of my clients use is withdrawal. I would say
Yeah.
that's like the dirty little secret. But if you're, because people use it, but they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. No
But
one wants it's hush hush.
exactly. But you can combine a method like withdrawal with a diaphragm, or
Yeah.
with a cervical cap or something like that. And if you're using fertility awareness to track where you are in your cycle, you can find usually some kind of combination of this that you and your partner are comfortable with, while you're also learning about your body, while you're also observing if there's any flags in your menstrual cycle or issues with hormonal health that you might need to take care of. And
Yeah.
you can do this all before you're even ready for pregnancy, so that by the time you're there, you're good. Like, your cycles are healthy. You've had all this time to focus on nutrition. So that's kind of my best case scenario for women who are wanting to prepare in advance for their first or second or third baby.
So you want to start tracking your BBT, but all of the rules feel maybe just a little bit difficult. Or maybe you've actually already tried your oral BBT tracking and you are constantly forgetting to take your temperature. Your charts are super hard to interpret because your temps are all over the place, and you're feeling like maybe this is actually adding stress into your journey. I felt the exact same way when I started using BBT tracking for my own fertility journey, and I actually remember when my partner and I went backwoods camping, and he could not stop laughing because I still packed my little pink thermometer in my backpack, but I was super dedicated, so dedicated that it actually started to impact my sleep. So when I heard about Temp Drop, I was instantly curious, and after over 2 years of using the device personally, I will never pick up an oral BBT thermometer again. Temp Drop is a wearable arm device that continuously tracks your temperature during your sleep and provides you with the most accurate basal body temperature through its advanced sensors and sophisticated algorithms. No more waking up at the same time every morning. No more worrying about waking up in the night. No more forgotten temps messing with your chart. Temp Drop literally eliminates all of the complicated rules of oral BBT temping and lets you have an accurate fertility tracker without all the added stress. Temp Drop can be used if you're a restless sleeper, a night shift worker, have long or irregular cycles, or maybe you're up nursing or up with your kids and still actually have the peace of mind that the data is being collected. I am obsessed with my Temp Drop and how easy it is to chart my cycle now. So I am super thrilled to offer you guys, my podcast community, a 12% discount on your Temp Drop device using the code KelseyTD, and you can combine this with any current promotion that the company is having.
That's super helpful. And it's something that I liked what you said at the very beginning when you shared the example of like woman A and woman B, and one, comes off proactively and knows she wants to get pregnant like a year from now. And now we have slightly less stress actually going through the transition period of coming off of the pill. Whereas woman B, who wanted to get pregnant, maybe a couple months ago and was waiting for her partner to get on board, and then now has come off the pill, and now we're entering that transition period. This can be a really great conversation to bring to the table with your partner of like, hey, we're not ready right this second, but let's, make sure we're doing the best that we can for both of our bodies, and bringing this into the picture. And The Fifth Vital Sign is Lisa's other book. That's a really good read as well in terms of getting a better understanding of your cycle and your hormones and what all this means. But I think I love your point about finding an instructor, because I find inside Fertility Confidence Method, when women come in and join us, if they already are tracking their cycle, a lot of times they're like, yes, I'm doing this, but I actually don't really know what any of this means. Or I have my charts, but like, I don't really know. I can't read them. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let's just go quickly through what you're doing, make sure we're doing it properly. And then let me help walk you through your chart about what I'm seeing. Or, they're scared or nervous, or they think they've heard me or someone else talk about doing BBT tracking, for example, or cervical fluid tracking, and they want to, but they are nervous or they don't feel like they're doing it right. And so they kind of hold back from having those markers. But when we're preparing your body to get pregnant, and or maybe you're already in the thick of your fertility journey, having these pieces of information can help guide us into figuring out the root cause pieces, while you're also doing the other stuff from what we've talked about today in terms of coming off the pill and nutrient replenishment and all that jazz. So as we wrap up here, Lisa, what is like 2 or 3 really quick things for our women who are listening that are either maybe in their transition phase coming off the pill, like freshly off the pill, or considering coming off the pill? What are some quick wins for them that they could start considering to just help their bodies right now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think right along with what you said, like when you went back to the example of woman A and woman B, one thing I wanted to say was that it doesn't have to be perfect. I know we've painted this picture, and of course we're going to share kind of like this concept of what would be optimal, but really anything you do with the time frame that you have is going to improve things significantly.
Yeah, I love that.
So I would try really hard not to get hung up on doing this the perfect way, because it's not, perfection is not necessary.
Yeah.
Pregnancy happens when it happens. Fertility finds a way. All of those things. It really is true. You don't have to have a perfect cycle to conceive.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so many cycles where conception happens where if I could share it with you and you could see it, you'd say, how is that possible? Look at all that stuff that's going on there. So this isn't about perfection. It's just about making a step in the right direction. So if you're in that transition phase, start learning about nutrition, start incorporating some of the key foods that we know are really high in the nutrients that we need, the nutrients that the pill was depleted. Start learning about your menstrual cycle, start tracking, even if you're just paying attention to your periods. But if you're interested in this topic, go a little bit deeper, start learning a little bit about what a healthy cycle looks like. Like we certainly lay that out in Real Food for Fertility.
Yeah.
And as you do that, you'll be able to see where you're starting from. And as things improve, you'll be able to see how your cycle improves over time. And I feel like that could be one of the most powerful things that you take away. If that's what you take away from today's conversation, then that could be one of the most powerful things that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love the book. It sits on my desk. And I think the biggest thing for me, I'm a very evidence-based practitioner. So to be able to have such a great quality resource full of so many impactful research-based examples. And Lily was mentioning to me that there are so many resources that they're not even printed in the book. You have to get them on the website because it would have made the book like twice the size. So, and it's already
200 extra pages.
Yeah, it's already quite thick. So
Lily and I were like, we can't have a 700-page book. We can't do it.
No one could bring it on an airplane. No, but I'm so glad you guys teamed up when Lily reached out and was like, hey, we wrote this book. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that the two of you, never met either of you in person, but I love that you guys wrote this book together. I think it's such a valuable resource. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing some of your wisdom. But why don't you share, Lisa, how our listeners can find more about you?
Well, first of all, thank you again. This conversation was so much fun. So thank you so much. You can find more about the book at realfoodforfertility.com. If this conversation interested you, you can tune into my podcast, Fertility Friday. You can just type in Fertility Friday in your favorite podcast player. Mm-hmm. I'm on Instagram at Fertility Friday. And I have a really fun resource for women's health practitioners. So it's an ebook called How to Interpret Virtually Any Chart your client throws at you. And so you can find that at fertilityfriday.com/chart.
Awesome. And I'll make sure all that is in the show notes for everybody. Thanks for joining me, Lisa. Hopefully we can chat again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.